Okay, morning everybody. Where we left off last week is we just kind of got a jump start on Lab 0503. And, this is where everything is starting to come together. And so these labs, we're going to, you're going to notice they're going to slow down a little bit in the amount of time that it takes to get it done. And so, we're doing full stack at this point where we're working with a lot of different components in React. We got a middle tier and a back end database, and making them all work together can be challenging. And so last week we kind of got a start on this lab where we brought in Bootstrap to a React app. We brought in React Router, and so we can do some navigation, and we started using that. And we're kind of here where we're ready to kind of bring in some other things like Toastify and having a bunch of different components. Now, I might not follow this along exactly to the T. What I kind of want to do is set it up so that our navigate, can actually get some functionality here. And so, if your code doesn't match this lab verbatim, that's quite okay. In fact, I would encourage some, to have some bring a unique spin on your particular. But this is there in case you're not sure where to go. And so this is kind of where we had it last week, where we had like basically a home page, which was our login page. And I wired up a Walker list route, but there's nothing there yet. So eventually we'll get there. And I want to wire this up so where, hey, you click the login button and it either logs you in or it doesn't. And then we can just keep on working on building this out. Essentially what this lab is building functionality into our components. Lab 0502, you were just building the front end components, and now we're building the Axios functionality to kind of essentially tie into our database and make it all work. I mean, that's the short version of this. That's where we're going. So, what I'd like to do is bring up my login form component, and I have a function here called onLogin, and I have a couple of state variables here called these are your hooks for your email address and your password. I've got a couple things here for error messages, of which ultimately I'm going to offload the error messages and the success messages into the Toastify that we learned about, the Toastify package. But for right now, we could just use these error and successes. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of bring that out and console log on login clicked. And I do need to bring in Axios. Now I believe we have Axios installed. We do. And so while we're at it, up at the top, I'll import Axios. Import Axios from Axios. And bring up my console, just get a simple click handler. Okay, so our click handler is handling a click. And if I say Bob and Bob, what I'll do next is just do a console log just to make sure that my state email is email and password is password. So if I clear that out, Bob and Sam, click login. Email is Bob, password is Sam. So my hooks are being set properly, so I'm good with that. Last week, when I kind of brought in the syntax for Axios, I used it using, when you have a promise, essentially you can handle it with a then block and a catch block. And so we did something like Axios, which was a method, and it had two arguments. So we kind of did this, comma, and we had that. And then we said dot then, and we had something there, and then we said dot catch. And so this was one syntax for working with Axios because it returns a promise. There's another syntax, which is where you work with the asynchronous version of the method call. And I wanted to refactor this code instead of just using this then block for the success and the catch block for the errors. You could put it in a try catch and then do the asynchronous method call. So I just want to show you the other syntax for working with Axios, which you might like a little bit more. I think I do too. Okay, so we're going to do a try catch, try block and catch. And then we'll do const res for response equals await Axios dot, and then you got to say what is your method. And so we are posting to our login. Let's pull up our Postman, and let's look at our list all dog walkers. Sure, save and override. That's the most recent. This is save it, save and close. So if I go to bug tracker and I go to users, go to login users, right? So here's a post, port 5003, API users login. And if I just boot that, now I should have my backend booted up. Don't know if I mentioned that. It is booted up. And you could see that my user can log in. And so it's a post. And so that's the reason I'm just showing you here the full route. Localhost 5003 API users login. So it's a post. So it's Axios.post, which you can kind of see the IntelliSense there. Okay, so this is our method call. I'm going to paste the route in right there. And comma, two arguments before, just like before. And the second argument is going to be our data. And put a semicolon right there. And this is going to need to be an async function then, so that we can await our post. And here we will pass in the email and password, so you can go email : email, password : password, or semi. And Oh, I gotta put my comma after my, there we go. Or, you know, as we've learned before, when they're the same name as the value, you could just do email comma password. Okay, and then we can console log res.data in the event that it's successful. In the event that it's unsuccessful, we'll console log ERR. Just leave it at ERR. So just a different syntax a little bit that we used last week. But let's log in. Now, a good username and password, eagudmested@rankit.edu, password of password. Let's refresh. eagudmested@rankin.edu, password of password, click login. And bad request failed status 400, status code 400. So let me dig into the data. Pause here. Okay, like we did last week, on our user.js, we need to accept JSON from the front end. So we're going to do router.use express.json. So this is on the user.js. And there we go. Welcome back, Evan Gudmested, user ID and an auth token. So I had to add that line to accept the data in JSON format from Axios, and now we are looking good. So let's click login. Now if I put in a bad password, you know, we have to handle these errors as well. Which, if you kind of dig down into the data invalid credentials, please try again. Well, cool. So we got Axios working on our front end, and we have valid credentials to handle the invalid credentials. Again, this was probably more complex than I thought it would have been, as far as handling the invalid case. Which is, we've got error, response, data, and error. Okay. Now again, if I inspect that, this is a bad password, so I go into my Axios error, response, data, error, invalid credentials, please try again. So let me pull that over here. That's my other back end. So in the case of the error, the response error, is there an error? Is there a response? Data, error. So that's if it's a string. What we're seeing here is if it's a string, meaning if you're giving invalid credentials. Let's clear it, paste. We could say invalid credentials, please try again. So then you say, if there's a res error, and if type of res error is string, we're going to set error to res error. So I don't know if that was hitting for us last week. I would expect in this case invalid credentials, right? There is a res error in that case, and that should be true. Res error should be a string. Maybe I don't need to put it in quotes. No. So let's save that, refresh. Okay, invalid credentials, please try again. There we go. That's what I would expect. Awesome. And up here, maybe we do set success to res data. And if I just go password, we see welcome back with all that gibberish now. Clearly to an end user, they don't need to see all that. In fact, what we'll do is we'll just redirect them to another screen. And then in the case of success, we need to clear out the error and vice versa. In the case of error, we need to clear out success. So if there's an error, we'll set success to empty. And in the case of success, we'll set error to empty. So clear that out, refresh. Good password. Okay, maybe we just say welcome back, Evan Gudmested. Don't really need the rest. Now, in that case, if I go to network, I believe from our back end, there's just a dot message. So let me pull up the back end of my issue tracker. And by the way, I'm going to have to redeploy this, right? Because this backend is also the live version, and my backend is going to need this express.json. So I'm going to need to redeploy my backend. So I'm going to take a minute to do that. But on my login, let's comment that out. And res status, JSON. Okay, I don't even have, it's just one string that I'm sending back. I don't have this in any sort of different pieces. I could break that down into an object, and then I could just save that, but that's okay. Okay. Maybe just take a moment here and redeploy the backend, because the next thing I want to do is, instead of using localhost on my front end, right? Instead of using localhost, I'm going to try using my backend that's live on the internet. And so to redeploy my backend, let's go here, stop my backend from running. Okay, I'm going to just run my deployment command to gcloud. Let's see, gcloud app deploy. And I'm going to continue. This will take a minute, so I'm going to pause. Okay, I still have my old, static front end, and so obviously this is not going to be what we use, but essentially, and this is what I would expect, you're not logged in. My back end's barking at me that I'm not logged in. So that's good. So I deployed those changes. And so let's go ahead, and I'm going to refactor this like we did last week to using a .env, and there was a .env .local and a .env .production. So let's just do .env .local. And in there we had React app API URL, and I put that at 5003. I'm just going to do the .env .local for right now. React underscore app API URL. In fact, let's just pull that up, pull that URL up. And I'm just going to copy that URL right there. Before I even refactor my environment variable, let's just replace it with the live. Now this should be hitting the same database. Goodmestead at rankin.edu. And there we go. Sweet. So now this is using my live backend. Live on the internet, I should say. You good with that, Grant?
I am not. Would you mind?
Yeah.
I might have missed this up here or there.
Yeah. So I created a .env.local, but I'm not using it yet. So I just paste my live URL after I redeployed it. So I redeployed it first, my back end.
Right. Then did you start your backend, your local backend again?
No, my local back end is not running.
Okay.
And then I paste my live URL here, which is appspot.com, and then finished it off with API users login. Is that what you have?
No.
Okay.
Or that's what I have. It's not running for me though.
Okay, I'll take a look. Okay, I'm gonna unpause here, and Grant and I just spent probably, what felt like an hour, maybe it was less, but the short version, and I'll kind of pull on, Discord and show that Grant's now logged in and successfully too. You can kind of see the success message there. The short version is once you're refactoring this and you're saying, hey, go from Google server with the back end. The Google server, called middle tier, is going to be the one making a request to Mongo. And so I'm not sure what that error message is, but Grant had to open up his IP addresses on Mongo for his issue tracker to be more than just his local IP address, because again, the request to log into the database is coming now from a Google server, who knows where in the world that is physically located. And really what you want to do is you want to find out that IP address of that server where your middle tier, your application is hosted. But in the short term, you could just open it wide up and basically allow requests coming into Mongo from all ports. And so Grant made that change and is now working, which is what we want. Okay. So I'm really putting the cart before the horse here, and we're by no means anywhere close to being done with the front end of our React app. But on localhost, it is up and running and doing what we want it to do. Now, so kind of here's the current state. What I am interested in is deploying the front end to Google Cloud, and it would have to be a different project. And so on Google Cloud, I have this issue tracker project. But along the way when I was tinkering, and I made another new project, and it's just called My Project. Of course, I can rename it. And what I like to do is deploy my front end to Google Cloud. And so I'm going to try this. It's probably not going to work. But I'm going to try it anyways. And then, if it doesn't work, we'll troubleshoot it. And maybe now, maybe later. So the one thing on the back end is the only thing we really needed to do is add this app.yaml and say what version of Node we're currently on, which is 18. If I go to my command line, cmd, and you go node/v, we see version 18. And so I'm just going to create this app.yaml file on my front end. And if you're with me at home, just don't follow along yet. If it works, then you can rewind and do this. And for now, just let's not follow along. So create a new file, app.yaml, paste my thing there. And obviously I don't want to deploy to my backend app. I don't want to deploy to my tribal flux, in other words, but I do want to deploy to my project Jibber Jabber. It would be nice that the ID was something more useful, but so I want to kind of here. We should already be authenticated with my Google account, but I need to run this command: gcloud config set project your project ID. So I'm going to kind of go into my front end and stop and pull that page kind of off to the side here. Gcloud config set project. Gcloud config set project. Paste. Okay. And then that was happy. And now let's try gcloud app deploy. And we're in US Central, so I'll say 17. We'll see what breaks. And so don't have permissions. Ha ha ha. Clearly, I'm Evan Gudmestead at gmail.com. And let me go into here. Let me go. That unique identifier. I'm not sure if that's actually my project, Jibber Jabber here. I mean, that does look like a unique identifier. Please check billing account associated. And so I kind of wonder if it's you can only get one for free kind of thing. You can only get one app on here for free. That's one thought. Now, maybe I did skip this one, gcloud auth login. So let me kind of try that. That might be a step I shouldn't have skipped. Gcloud auth login. This would make sense, but presumably I've already done that. See, I thought I already did that. You are now logged in. Okay, so now I'm going to set my project ID again. Now I'll try deploying. Yeah. make sure you have App Engine Developer roles, App Engine Developer role. Okay, well, that's a different error message. Originally, I wasn't even, my original thought at least, there are other cloud services to deploy the front end, so it was kind of whimsical to try and deploy it to App Engine, because there are other services that you could use Azure front end that could work just as well, but I was going to try App Engine. Make sure I'm not breaking anything on my back end. Okay. We will pause on that again. We'll come back to where do we host this on the front end. All right. About 37 minutes in. Let me come back to that, come back to that, come back to... I'm just going to save this article even though it's just the basic commands. Okay. Let's refactor the URL into this env.local. So even though this is here, let's copy this. I still want, even in my local, I want it to go here. And now, inside of this, we're going to change this to backticks. Delete the URL. React app API URL. Okay, clear the screen, npm start. Good password. Okay. Refactored to use .env.
Mr. D, could you show your .env file again? Because I had to delete that. Oh, it's just that.
Yep.
That URL. Okay.
Yep. Got yours good to go?
Yes, I think.
Cool. Okay, on my app.js, I'm going to bring in use state and configure a hook for the authentication. So I'm going to import use state, and while I'm at it, use effect from React, and const auth set auth use state null. And on my login form, all right, we made a function here as well called onLogin. That accepts auth. And we go set auth to the auth variable here, and we navigate. Now navigate, we need to bring in navigate from React Router. We have use navigate. Import use navigate. From React Router DOM. And use navigate. Then we could say navigate to whatever our route is, which is slash bug slash list. Why it says Walker list, but it needs to be bug list. So let's fix that inside of our nav bar. Bug list. And then so did we define routes? I don't know that we defined routes yet inside of app.js. So inside of apps.js, we never defined our routes. So let's do that. So here's main. Let's set up our routes. Route path of root as an element of login form. need to bring in routes and route. From React Router DOM, so up top, import routes. Well, we could just add it right here. There we go. Okay, so we're at root. We're still getting that pinged up. We still are hitting our Mongo database and getting our user logged in. Let's set up another route path of /bug /list. And we don't have an element for that, so let's come back to that. And if I borrow from Grant something of the sort to at least get it started, and he does have a list.css. So let me bring in the list.css. CSS there, but okay, I need to add the component. So we go to our app.js, element equals bug list, and we need to import bug list. Did that all kind of fast, so I might have had a typo somewhere. Function bug list. Well, I fixed it on my end, and I'm kind of, there's just two different syntaxes for kind of doing the same thing. Notice the change that I made is I just said export function bug list. versus what it was before, which you came down to the bottom and it said export default bug list. And so I deleted that export down at the bottom and just said export at the top, and that gets my bug list going. So I can go home, I can go bug list, and you know, we're not calling on our back end, so it doesn't really care that I'm not authenticated right now. Just bug list isn't really pulling any data, but it's just some mock-up right now. And so we'll get there, but this is where we are. And if I go log in, there we go. So that now that we have our routes kind of defined, we were going down this path of like, hey, we want to ultimately be able to set the auth. And so, you know, this auth variable, and then navigate to the bug list. And then of course the bug list should be able to list the bugs that are in our database. And so, you know, a lot of these URLs, if I'm going to use the local host or if I'm going to use the live version, we'll probably just use the live version. So what I'm getting at is we need to pass this function down to our login form. SetAuth equals setAuth, and then receive that here, login form setAuth. And then now we can begin to construct our authentication information as we did last week, which we'll want to bring in JWT decode. So let's terminate the batch job, npm I always forget, is it a dash or a hyphen? JWT hyphen decode. JWT hyphen decode. Okay, and npm start back up. Then now import JWT underscore decode from JWT hyphen decode. And now our token, if I kind of look at our back end and how it's sending our token over, I'm going to probably want to restructure our back end so that it's sending an object instead of just a string. Right now, when I look at my login route, we just say welcome back, and we just got a string here. There's really no object, so I can instead maybe do something like res status 200 .json, and then I'll say message welcome back Okay, message is that auth token is auth token. User ID is found user dot underscore ID. And maybe if I really want to payload auth. Well, let's hold on. This is on the back end, so let me just hold it right there. So that's my JSON. It has a message, a token, and a user ID. And presumably, if we have to redeploy that every time now. No, see, this is wanting to use my project, so no, that's not what I want. Clearly, I'm gonna hit new. And I gotta switch it back to the correct project. Pause. Okay, so the command is g cloud config set project project ID. That looks right. Glad I'm not messing up my back end by messing with those settings on the front end. I'm getting those permission issues on the front end. I was like, don't get the permission issues on the back end. Knock on wood. Okay, file upload done, view your application, deployed service. Okay, so now when I log in, this should look a little different. And I might have even taken my success messages out. Okay. I didn't, so that's good. So welcome back. There's my auth token. Okay, so that's been refactored on the back end. So that's my user ID, and that's my auth token. And now let's go back to the front end here. So on success, let's bring in auth payload equals JWT underscore decode res.data.token. This is where we stored the auth token. Again, backend. No, it's .auth token. And I'm just going to console log auth payload. Console refresh. Objects are not valid as React child. Okay, there's our console log, our token. So that's good. We got our user back with a bunch of information in our auth token, so that's good. Something else is crashing, which we need to examine. Is yours crashing too?
Yeah, I've got the same thing.
Yeah. So let me set this as res.data.message. So that's probably it right there. The set success message. Let's clear that out. There we go. Welcome back, Evan Gudmestead. And there's our auth token with our roles and all that fun stuff.
Can you show that
Yeah.
change really quick?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh.
Okay, so now we can build up our front end information that we want to store in our hook in an object, and then ultimately call our set auth method and pass in auth. Actually, we did something a little bit different. Here, we don't, inside of on login, we call set auth. I sent down the wrong function. I'm going to pass down on login. Now, this is where I ran into a naming conflict last time. So I'm sending a function down called on login, and then here's a function called on login. So I'm just going to refactor this on. I'm going to call this on submit login, and go down on our button click, call on submit login. Right. So now we bring in on login here, and on login we pass in our auth object that we're about to build out. And then we don't need a set error or set success right now. Okay, so maybe we'll set the email. And the auth token, res dot, our auth token is auth. And let's just set the payload. It's auth payload. Again, the payload has a lot of information in it. So then we call on login, pass it this object, which sends it up here into this auth. We call set auth here and navigate to bug list. And so if this is working, you know, ultimately auth has an email property. And so maybe on the bug list we extract that, right? So I might do something like send the auth down to our bug list. Auth equals auth. And on our bug list, we'll accept auth. And then just to test it, we should have the email. Maybe we'll say curly's here. The syntax. If you want to say if auth.email, then auth.email and do a little span, close span, auth.email. So you log in, you have auth.email, and then you save the token, and then you save the payload that's in the token. And let's see what breaks. So we're going to say EA Gudmested, password, log in. Okay, search results, EA Gudmested or Rankin.edu. And there we go. We are logged in. Now we got to get this to say log out kind of deal. And maybe we put the username or something up there. Welcome Evan. Welcome Evan Gudmested, because I've got that stored in my object there. Doing all right, Grant?
Yep, mine's good.
Awesome. So maybe the next thing I do is I just get this little button to say log out if you are in fact logged in. So let's go to the nav bar. And I don't remember coding this, but here it is. It says here just hard code your auth.email. Here, oh, you know what, we just pulled this. So here's a nav. If you're authenticated, then we show so let's go ahead and make a function called onClick logout just to make that happy. On okay, so for authenticated, we say here's your email with a logout. If you're not authenticated, it should say login. So if I go home, okay, still saying login. Even though auth should be set at that point. Yours doing the same thing?
Yeah, mine's not switching either.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to login form. We call on login. On login sets auth and navigates to bug list, at which point we send down auth, and we even use it right here, which is on bug list. We say, hey, if there's an auth email, so let's go back to my nav bar. So here's not auth. Here's if you are auth.email. Let's just try that again. Maybe I just had to. I don't know if it's doing it on both of ours. Mm-hmm. There it is. Took me just a second, but here's navbar, and we actually don't send auth down into navbar, so we need to go auth equals auth. We need to send auth down into navbar, so that it can be received like such, and then it can be used like such. So now we are cooking. We got the email address and a logout button. That logout button should in fact log us out, so let's fix that. And so let's up here in app, we have an on login function, on logout. We just clear set auth to null. And then on log out equals on log out so we receive on log out here. Oh no, I'm sorry, that needs to be on the navbar, not on the login form. Not on the login form. Because the logout link is here. So navbar, we pass down on logout, and then we receive it on logout here. Maybe we could just call it directly instead of having this middle function. But here we navigate to the root, call logout. Okay, and that takes us out. Logged in. I could take my name out of there. So that's on the bug list. I don't need this anymore. And ultimately for my table, you know, this will be refactored for each table row. Here we got a T head, we got a T body, table row. Each table row will have a mapping of a bug. But we're at the point where we should be able to use Axios to bring in our bug list. Let's see what's out there on Mongo. Take a look at our bugs. That will be ultimately working with. So this is issue tracker v2 and browse collections. And it looks like I've got 3 bugs. And so now my bug list, let's take a look at the back end here. If I look at my bug list on my back end, we do have to have the permission of can view data and is logged in. So as I've been logging in here, can view data is true is one of my permissions. So EA Gudmestad can view data, and obviously I am logged in. So that should allow me to view the bugs, at least from Axios's or from the back end point of view. So that's the back end. Now on the front end, I'm going to need to import Axios and use state, of course, and use effect, because we're going to load these as the page load. bugs, set bugs, use state. Okay, use effect, comma. Here we say anytime auth changes. And not sure if we can use the asynchronous version here of Axios, because before we had to mark our function so in our login form we called await, and so this had to be async. Yeah, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to use the other syntax since this is inside of use effect. We'll just use the promise version where we receive a promise. Axios. That's our URL. These are our options. Then you get a response. Or you get an error where you catch the error, do something with that. Okay, so here plug in that variable. Process.env dot, and now slash API bugs list. Okay, and then in here we say headers authorization bearer if there's an auth. Let's look at how we saved it on the back end. Auth token. As such. Ooh, let's spell that right. Auth, A-U-T-H-O-R-I-Z-A-T-I-O-N. console log res.data if it worked. Console.log ERR if it didn't. Okay. Log out. Clear you. See what's broke. EA Gudmstead. Password. Enter. Aha, 3 bugs. Okay, so we're getting our data from our back end. Grant, are you getting your data?
I am.
Sweet. Now, you know, to be thorough, we would want to log in as a user that doesn't have permission. So maybe let's log out and let's just click bug list. And here, when you just click bug list, you can see you've got request failed with status code 401. So we need to handle that. Of course, a 401 status code unauthorized. So that's what we would expect. So you log in, you get the successful data back. You don't log in, you don't. Going good. So then let's set bugs. Res data. And that will allow us to loop through our bugs with a mapping function and spit them out in a table. So as we go down into our table, title, classification, and closed. So like if I go up to a bug, I see a title. I see a description. Some of my bugs. There it is, classification. And closed. Okay. So there's all the data. We're going to use Lodash. So let me see if I brought in Lodash. I think I have it on my front end. Package JSON, Lodash. So let's import from and so here we have a bunch of bugs. What we'll do is we'll make a component that is a bug component, so that we can loop through, and on each one we can this is obviously our bug list, but then we'll also have a bug item. So here, bug item JSX. I'm not sure, Grant, if you have a bug. Was it bug summary that we had?
Oh yeah, I got
A bug
bug summary.
And so the bug summary is bunch of divs. So your bug summary will be my bug item. And format with prettier. Okay. And so is each one of these like a row basically?
No, so this was sort of my thought process was to have the bug list be, I guess that it wouldn't have all of the data with the bug list, and they would be, you would click on one of the bugs and you would get the full summary of it with all of it. Because I thought
Oh, I see.
table could get really busy when you have all the comments and everything in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep,
So
yep.
this was just like dummy data for one of my bugs just to see how it laid out at that point.
I see, I see. Okay. So now, so I'll just kind of hand select my bug item and maybe take it out of the bug list and say each bug item is a TR, kind of like this. This is what we'll do. Take our bug list out. Say, hey, each bug item, we'll just hard code it like that. And then we'll set a Lodash map of the bugs. And for each bug, do this. And that is so I got to bring in bug item. Bug is bug, and we'll send down auth as well. And so, this should basically show the same bug 3 times at this point because we just have some static data here, and we can get this to be Bootstrap friendly. But basically, here when the page loads, we set the bugs. We know that there's 3 bugs, and we're mapping out each bug into a bug item. And right now our bug item is some static data, so I'm just expecting 3 little static. Now, obviously, I have to be logged in to do such. And we are getting our data. So let me log out. Okay, so we are getting the data. And so that should be going into bugs. And because we're getting the console log. And then oh, I did it again. This is exactly what I did last time. I need a parenthesis right here. That's exactly what I did last time. There we go. Now it says each child must have a unique key prop. And so we can kind of come back here on our bug list and set key equals bug dot, I think it's underscore ID. And I gotta log in. Log in. There we go. Now the data's coming back with no errors. We get 3 bug titles. So then to refactor that, we go into the bug item and we say we're going to bring in the bug which was sent over. Might as well bring in auth. I'm not sure if we do anything with it. And then we just say bug.title, bug.classification, bug.closed, should say true or false. Okay, close. Bug.closed. Closed is false. All 3 of my bugs are closed of false. Bug title is showing up. Classification is showing up. Closed is not. And I wonder, if it's something like that will get the job done. No.
Mr. G, I was just messing around and I got mine to work with just bug.close.toString.
Perfect. As such.
Yep.
Nice. That's what I was looking for. All right. Okay, so the next thing I just noticed here, everything's going good. But if this is, bug number 1, bug number 1, bug number 1, instead of 1, 2, 3. And so there's basically a way to extract the index of your bugs. We have a bugs array. And so we're looping through that bugs array using Lodash. And if I remember right, we can say, okay, loop through our bugs. And here's for a bug, and then I think you put your index. Yeah, so index number, you can kind of see getting some IntelliSense help. And so now that represents, 0 for the first bug, and I should be able to say index equals index and send that down to the bug item, and then I should be able to receive the index, and then maybe we do index. And that at least gets 0, 1, 2. Of course, if you don't want 0, because who starts their count at 0 besides programmers, you add 1 to it. Now you get 1, 2, 3. So that's easy enough.
Could you show the bug list code, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
So mine's coming back not a number.
Bug comma index.
Yeah.
And then index equals index.
Yep, I've got all that.
And then over here you receive index.
Yeah.
All right, let's
And
pause
then-
and look. Okay, that was one where Grant fixed his own problem and just sometimes you just don't know exactly what happened. It just fixes itself magically. And so that's kind of where we're at the moment. You know, there's a lot of direction that we could go. You know, we want to bring in Toastify and there's going to be a point where you know, everyone's going to be, you know, essentially able to kind of run their own and kind of build out what you want to build. You know, I just wanted to essentially get everyone started with the foundations so that you can get to that point, and we're getting pretty close to that point. You know, probably pause here for a moment. Okay, you know, we're looking at the beginning of a front end for this application, and you know, a lot of directions that we could go from here. But what I'm thinking I'd like to do is get Toastify working, and that's kind of where the lab kind of has you bring in React Toastify. So maybe you'll just close down. There's React Toastify. So let me just close down everything because a lot can be open that we don't need. And so inside of app.js, import toast container from React Toastify, as well as the CSS. React-Toastify, dist, React Toastify CSS. Okay. And then we bring in our toast container, maybe, and we'll get to kind of play with the location that makes sense, but here's the div class of app. So there's our toast container. And then you basically make a function here and you pass it down for an error message or a success message. And maybe I could just copy and paste those. We'll see if that. We got to bring in this toast method as well. So this will allow us to call show error or show success. And let's go ahead and pass that down to our login form. Show error equals show error, show success. So this is bottom right. And again, we can look at the docs and tinker, but basically this is our function call, this function toast. We pass it a custom message and you can give it all sorts of configuration options. But let's call show success now. So that sends it down to the login form. So if I go to my components, login form, show success, and maybe we call show success here, and we'll say something like welcome auth.email. Scroll to the bottom of this window. Doesn't like my path to React Toastify CSS. So let's see if that's changed inside of Node Modules. Looking for React Toastify. React Toastify dist. React, one word, React Toastify CSS. And if you want to bring in the minimize one, I'm not sure how I lost it, but there it is. Dist. I'm going to do capital R, capital T. Okay. Now it's happy. Of course, you could also do React Toastify minimized CSS. Would be a little and so let me update the Google Doc for anybody following that. Assuming that's right. Let's boot it up. And then welcome EA Gudmstead at Rankin.edu. That's good. We got an extra curly there. That was inside of my login form. There's my extra curly. And let's, instead of set error, which we're kind of using Toastify for these now. Instead of set error, we passed in a function called show error. So let's bring in show error. And delete that. Show error. Use effect is defined but never used. That's okay for now. And login form error and success not defined. Well, I just commented that out. Line 109 and line 110. We'll just delete those because we're not using them.
Mr. G, could you show your app.js real quick?
Yeah. What part?
I'm missing something on setting up Toast. Like.
So I had to bring in Toast container and Toast from React Toastify.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, now, again, I don't know if you put in a bad password that you necessarily want that invalid, invalid credentials, please try again. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't. it's also worth saying that, hey, this doesn't handle all situations, right? So like empty, that's not working, right? So we've only really addressed something where they type in an invalid email and password. But I at least want to get Toastify at least to this point for now. And if I give a good one, we get welcome. And I'm good with that for now. Okay, let's take a look. If we leave it blank, we are getting error details, and this is coming from this is a console log that's printing out right here. And so it's not firing res error as a string because res error is an object. And there's a details property with two, they're basically an array. So that's why this is false. It's not a string. Res error is an array. And that's coming from Joy. So that's where we did this else if, right? So it's not a string. Else if res error details, which again, that's coming from this else if is basically our Joy validation. That's where we did lodash map of our details. Do something like let Joy error So again, so there is the array dot message. So your array dot message now I'm trying this concat method, maybe plus a new line, something like that. We gotta bring in lodash. And so, you know, you leave both of them blank, so you want it to say, you know, um, you can't leave them empty or whatever it's going to say. And for each error, concatenate this string with the message in a new line. And then let's show error with the joy errors in this case. Let's see what broke. So if I leave them both blank, okay. Close but no cigar. Details. 0 message. Email is not allowed to be empty. Password is not allowed to be empty. So we try for each one, return joy error. I'm just trying to concatenate it differently. Joy error plus equals x dot message. Let me refresh. Email is not allowed to be empty. Password not allowed to be empty. That's kind of what I was going for. So now
Mr. G, could we pause for a sec?
yeah. Okay, so we are handling a couple of scenarios with the login. Scenario 1 is just if they're blank. Let's just put in some gibberish. Invalid credentials. Invalid credentials. We'll see if we leave password blank, what happens. Password is not allowed to be empty. That's coming from Joy. Let's do invalid credentials. I think there's some scenarios here that we're not covering for, but for right now, that seems to be, I'm trying to think, what am I missing? Like maybe if I put in email must be a valid email, that's right. Okay, I imagine there's some more scenarios because I've coded for more scenarios in the past, but it seems to be catching what I would expect right now. And for right now, now I want to console table auth.payload. Maybe console log auth.payload. Which is what we're getting out of our JWT decode. So, you know, Grant, we're kind of discussing off camera recording, you know, when it comes down to permissions. Notice when I look at the payload, I've got my user's name, but I can also say if my payload has a permission of can view data equals true. So let's expect that. Permissions is your object. So permissions dot can create bug So if I'm going to trace this, right? So auth.payload dot permissions dot can add comments. Right, if I log out and log back in, see, we get that evaluates to true. So you can on the front end evaluate permissions is one thought. You see how I did that? Or does it make sense, I should say?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Um, so what can you do with that? Well, maybe since this is in auth, this is in our auth object, right? Maybe on our nav bar, maybe you say, okay, well, if then, what was the one like can add no can modify roles, right?
Right, yeah.
Then you see the component to modify the role, or you see the link that can take you to the component that can modify the role.
Right.
So just thinking forward a little bit on that. Okay. Okay, so we got all the toasts going. We'll build these as we go. Login, register, bug list. So having this screen and set screen here, this is no longer needed. Oh, this is remove the screen. Yeah, we never use that. There we go. There we go. We never used on navigate. This was something that I didn't introduce. On login, we do this. On log out. How about that? On log out, we show success that says the user is logged out. So on log out, so on our nav bar, show success equals show success, and then we'll bring in show success. Log out. So that when I log in, welcome Mia Gudmestead, log out, it says logged out. I go back to my bug lists, I no longer need to console log my res.data, so I can comment that out. Now probably you don't even want the user to see this link, the bug list, unless they're logged in. Right, so let's fix that. We don't want the user to see bug list unless they're logged in. Because right now, we get a 401, which is not logged in, right? Response, you are not logged in. So let's go back to our nav bar. And for now, we'll just do something simple like auth and we can continue to show nav links based on if they're just logged in or not. Or like I kind of mentioned earlier, if they have a specific permissions, we could show different links based on the permissions that they may have. So go home, there's no more EA. Log in, logged in, there's my bug list. Okay. All right, I want to keep this one about 2 hours. So Grant, you good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I'm going to stop this video here, try and keep them about every 2 hours.